Hi, I will be discussing the topic of pasture management, what it is, what the goals and purposes of pasture management are, and most importantly, what are the primary components of effective pasture management. Pasture management is defined as managing pastures to maintain dense and desirable vegetation. This is the goal, dense and desirable vegetation. This goal has three purposes: to maximize the feed value available to the animals from the pastures while at the same time providing a healthy environment for the animals, and most importantly, to protect water quality with everything that we're doing in managing our pastures. Another important distinction that needs to be made at the outset is that pastures are not exercise lots. This is portrayed very graphically in these two photos. Pastures provide vegetation that provide feed value to the animals, whereas exercise lots are places for animals to be outside, primarily to have fresh air and exercise, and oftentimes, as seen, these areas become very sparsely vegetated and provide little feed value for the animals. Here is an online link for a excellent publication if you desire more information on managing your pastures. It's entitled Pastures, Fencing, and Watering on Small Acres. We will introduce and briefly discuss four fundamental components of effective pasture management. They are maintaining soil fertility levels, maintaining vegetative pasture sward, practicing rotational grazing, and strategically locating and managing congregation areas in pasture. The first component of effective pasture management is maintaining soil fertility levels. A soil sample and test should be taken every 3 years on each pasture. If you have a series of pastures or paddocks that all have the same animals on them and they're managed pretty much the same, you could combine those pasture areas into one soil sample as long as the acreage from where that soil sample is taken does not exceed 20 acres. It's very important that you practice a soil testing program and maintain optimum pH and fertility levels. This is very critical for the growth of the grasses and the legumes that you have in your pasture. pH allows for optimum uptake of nutrients by those pasture plants. Once you have your soil test report back from the lab, it's vital that you follow the recommendations for lime and fertilizer on that soil test report. The second component of effective pasture management is maintaining dense vegetation. This is done by controlling animal access, as opposed to allowing the animals to have continuous unrestricted access to the pasture areas. And this control means that we're putting them in at a certain time and then removing them and leaving them off of that area for a period of time. And it's all centered around the height of the vegetation. We begin grazing a pasture paddock when the vegetation height is at 6 to 8 inches. The animals are then removed when they've grazed the grass down to a height of 2 to 3 inches. Then the paddock is allowed a period of time to rest and also allow regrowth back to the 6 to 8 inches of grass height. And this may take different lengths of times depending on the season related to the amount of water and also temperature. Pastures will grow much more quickly in the spring and in the fall than during the heat of the summer. Two other aspects of management of our pastures to maintain dense vegetation is that we should not manage our pastures so as to allow the animals access during wet conditions. Hoof action is very destructive to the plants and counterproductive to our goal of dense vegetation. Also, during the growing season, mowing our pastures maybe 2 to 3 times to remove old unpalatable plants that the animals will not eat, also to control undesirable weeds, and to stimulate uniform regrowth of our pastures during those rest and regrowth periods is very important. The third key component to effective pasture management is to practice rotational grazing. and this is oftentimes called a rotational grazing system, and it involves dividing the pasture into a series of smaller paddocks. The animals are then rotated from one paddock to the next based on vegetation height, which we discussed a moment ago. And a key component of this system oftentimes is a sacrifice lot. The word sacrifice refers to the fact that we're going to sacrifice vegetation in this area. And the idea is that when we do not have pasture paddocks available that have adequate grass height, or maybe they're too wet or they're snow covered, we keep the animals in the sacrifice lot until we have adequate grazing height or conditions in our pasture areas, and then the animals are allowed to graze at that time. The final component of effective pasture management is managing congregation areas. Animals in pastures will find places to congregate. This will happen around feed and watering areas. In the heat of the summer, they'll find shade if it's available, and in the winter, they'll find warm places to stand in the sun. And what happens at these places is that there's a deposition and accumulation of significant amounts of manure. And this becomes a possible source of animal health problems, and also significantly a pollution source. And so to manage these congregation areas, they should be located as far away from streams as possible, and to make sure that runoff from these areas does not reach the streams. Another key management practice is that throughout the grazing season and while these areas are being used is to periodically remove the accumulated manure from them. This has been a very brief introduction to pasture management. For more help and assistance in managing your pastures, contact your local county conservation district. They will also be able to direct you to Natural Resources Conservation Service grazing specialists that are skilled and experienced in setting up pasture systems and managing pastures and all the aspects that go into those systems. Two other helpful resources, a website and a publication, and the links online are provided here also. Remember, the goal is to manage pastures to maintain dense and desirable vegetation.